Good evening and welcome to One Exclusive. I'm your host, Alna. Tonight in studio, we explore the practices of Islam and we speak to a correctional officer about the staggering amount of youth in prisons. Shocking figures released by the Namibia Correctional Services show that out of 3,600 inmates countrywide, 2,200 are under the age of 30. What is the impact of these figures on our society and our economy? And how does the state deal with rehabilitating these young citizens? After the break, we speak to Deputy Commissioner Tjiroze from the Namibia Correctional Services. Welcome, Deputy Commissioner Tjiroze.
Thank you.
Now, 60% of our countrywide inmates are under 30. That's just to give the viewer an idea, 2,100 out of 3,600 inmates. Now, obviously, their social repercussions are huge, but before we get to that, there are special challenges that you face with this statistic in corrections. Am I right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, I think when we hear these statistics, we might think that Namibia is in a unique situation. But in actual fact, this is a worldwide phenomenon across the world, is that we find that oftentimes a great proportion of those individuals who are incarcerated are in fact young offenders. I think some of it has to do with the fact that young people are the ones who are likely to engage in criminal activities. And so we face challenges in corrections in terms of the fact that these young offenders engage in certain problematic behavior within correctional facilities, including threatening fellow inmates as well as correctional officers. And the other problematic behavior that these young offenders engage in, and it has in recent weeks been covered within the media, is the smuggling of contraband. And an interesting thing to note is that members of the general public are often the ones who bring in these banned items into correctional facilities to offenders, and most of these individuals are female members of the public that bring in these contrabands.
Just to get a picture of the young men and women, I'm going to say mostly young men because I think there's only an 8 to 10% of female inmates. Am I right? Or?
About 3% of our offender population is female.
Going into prison that early, there are specific challenges you face. I'm just thinking logically, if family members can't actively participate in your development as a young person, there must be implications on job security and education and stuff like that.
It's interesting that you bring up factors such as employment and education, because we find within corrections that many of our young offenders are illiterate. And a lot of them haven't really obtained high educational attainments. And so this is one of the factors. I think it kind of makes sense when we think about it, because that's one of the factors that lead to offending. If you're unemployed, if you have lack of education, you're likely to commit offenses. And so we sit with young offenders in correctional facilities who are unable to engage in rehabilitation programs, especially the structured rehabilitation programs that address their offending because of their literacy levels. And the Namibian Correctional Service is kind of engaging in concerted efforts to address this problem of literacy. And we have a program of functional literacy where we teach these offenders, basic literacy skills to enable them to function in the world outside. And also we understand that even though we have kind of a knowledge-based economy and the environment around in society is kind of puts pressures on individuals who are uneducated, because we do not have many opportunities in terms of our manufacturing industries, in terms of more informal ways of being employed. They're limited in society, and so we try to also include vocational training within correctional facilities. And this is another challenge that we face, because we understand that there is also a lack of trained vocational instructors, and there is a lack of machinery in order to empower these individuals with the skills that they need within the workshops. So we have workshops at correctional facilities, and we also have agricultural initiatives. We have several agricultural farms throughout Namibia.
So you gearing these young men, when they do leave, they are rehabilitated in the fact that they've got a skill set. They also, unfortunately, I don't believe a lot of ex-convicts keep a job very long, which brings us to another thing, the rehabilitation of the men's spirits and their way of thinking.
Yeah.
I know that young men in prisons are more prone to sexual victimization. And the suicide rates are higher amongst young inmates. So could you tell us, how do you guys deal with those specific depression and anxiety, those challenges?
Well, I think that, you know, there's a misconception when we think about corrections, because oftentimes not many people are exposed to the world of corrections. So when we think about suicide rates, the suicide rates, in fact, within corrections is much lower than within the general population, and that's because there are certain mechanisms that are put in place. We make sure that we orientate offenders once they come in, because they have adjustment problems when they come into correctional facilities. We ensure that there are mental health services available. We have counselors at various correctional facilities, and we have referral to mental health services. And so these are the types of things that we try to implement in order to curb these kinds of problems. But there are problems in terms of mental health. I think there's a recognition worldwide, and sadly also in Namibia, that correctional facilities have become like surrogate mental health hospitals because of the lack of mental health facilities within communities and within society. And so we sit with a lot of individuals who have mental health problems. A great proportion of offenders have personality problems because they have antisocial personality and so on. But we also have individuals with severe mental health problems such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and also individuals with intellectual disability. So there's a wide range of mental health problems among young people within correctional facilities.
So not only are you rehabilitating these young men or attempting to, there are actual serious medical conditions and stuff that corrections needs to face with this statistic.
Yeah.
Okay, we're a bit short on time. We're just going to wrap up. The biggest causes were the cases that you've seen. Now, just to bring it back again to the community, we've spoken a bit about poverty, literacy. We've spoken about mental health problems, but this seems cyclical. If a young man goes to prison, the chances of him being incarcerated again is so much higher. So what are the main causes of crime and violence that you see in our communities?
When we think looking at crime and violence, there is no real direct connection that we found, because we haven't really collected data on that. But we've looked at, because the Namibian Correctional Service has adopted an evidence-based approach to corrections, which is kind of a hallmark of modern corrections worldwide. And so we have factors that are called criminogenic factors, and these are factors that are directly linked to individuals offending or them engaging in criminal activity. And so we address these factors. And when a research was conducted among Namibian offenders, it was found that education, employability was a risk factor for offenders within the Namibian context.
What would employability mean? I understand if I'm less educated, more prone to crime, less job opportunities. Is that employability?
Yeah, employability is kind of your skill set, your ability to be able to secure employment.
So to be a productive part of the workforce then, in other words. Okay.
And so this is a risk factor specifically for Namibian offenders.
Okay, right.
Yes.
So that brings us down to the next and final question. With all these risk factors and with the context of criminality, how do we stop this from happening? How do we keep our young men out of the prisons and in the communities where they can become participating, meaningful members of society?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on, you know, how I can help as a correctional officer and how the community can help, I'm always reminded of a quote by Maya Angelou, and she quoted a thinker named Cornelius, and she stated that he said that I am human, so nothing human can be alien to me. So I think a lot of times when we think of these individuals who have committed often heinous crimes, we think to ourselves that no, we would never be able to have the capacity to engage in that kind of behavior. But then we have to understand that as much as we have the capacity to engage in that extreme behavior, we also have the capacity to engage in positive, productive behavior. And so we need to destigmatize these individuals, right? We need to engage them. And so family members can do things like visit individuals who are incarcerated. The community, once individuals are released, they can offer them job opportunities, because sometimes, like I said, we are working towards ensuring that these offenders have employability. You know, they're employable, and so they have the skill set in order to secure employment.
So in other words, these guys have done their time. Let's give them a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I think
let's
it's
not
a simple
alienate them.
message.
It's a simple message. Maybe not that easy to grasp mentally, but I think at the end of the day, acceptance, forgiveness, and realizing that if we don't stand together, we influence each other negatively, right?
And also starting from a young age, you know, because if we're thinking of young offenders, we can track down their trajectory to offending through the fact that they didn't really have positive role models. They didn't have people modeling proactive behavior towards them. So it's about setting boundaries for children, ensuring that they have structure in their lives, and making sure that children are raised in a way that they understand the consequences to their actions.
Fantastic. Deputy Commissioner, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
And I hope we see you again shortly.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Namibian Imam Nehumbu Mohammed talking about Islamic practices in Namibia, as well as his views on religious extremism.